The axle cracked with a sound like a rifle shot. Andrew's wagon lurched sideways, throwing his daughter against the sideboard. Thomas cried out, clutching his carved wooden horse. The team of horses whinnied and stamped as the whole rig tilted at an impossible angle. Whoa! Andrew hauled on the reins, bringing them to a shuddering stop. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma's small voice, "Papa." "Stay put." Andrew climbed down, boots hitting prairie dust. The damage told its story in splintered wood and twisted iron. The rear axle had sheared clean through. The wheel canted at a sickening angle. Andrew knelt beside it, running his hands over the brake. No amount of rope or prayer would fix this. Behind him, Emma peered over the wagon's edge. "Can we still reach Uncle Samuel's ranch?" Andrew looked west. The mountains rose purple and distant against the autumn sky, their peaks already white with early snow. Colorado lay beyond them, his brother's ranch, the fresh start he'd promised his children after their mother died. "Papa." Thomas climbed down, wooden horse gripped tight. "Give me a minute, son." Andrew walked a slow circle around the wagon. He checked the iron fitting, the splintered wood, the bent wheel hub. Every angle confirmed what he already knew. They were 40 miles from the nearest settlement, with winter breathing down their necks and no way forward. He'd been so careful, checked every inch of that wagon before they left Missouri, greased the axles, tested the wheels, packed supplies for 3 months on the trail. A widower and 2 small children didn't get second chances. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the empty prairie gold. "We're making camp here," Andrew said finally. Emma's face crumpled. "But Uncle Samuel's expecting us." "I know, sweet girl." He unhitched the horses, his movements mechanical, set up their bedrolls in the wagon's shadow, built a small fire as the sky deepened to violet. The children ate beans from tin plates, watching him with worried eyes that cut deeper than any broken axle. Thomas fell asleep against the useless wheel, still holding that wooden horse Andrew had carved last winter. Emma tried to stay awake, tried to be brave, but exhaustion finally claimed her too. Andrew sat alone by the dying fire. He'd been running towards something since Sarah died. Purpose. Direction. A place where he could build a life for his children that honored her memory. Everything had pointed west. Now he stared at a broken wheel gleaming in moonlight, a grave marker for dreams that died in the dust. The prairie wind whispered through dry grass. Somewhere an owl called. Andrew pulled his coat tighter and wondered what kind of man let his children down this badly. He had no answer. Just a broken wagon and winter coming fast. The sound of an approaching wagon woke him near dawn. Andrew sat up, hand instinctively moving to the rifle. But the wagon that emerged from the morning mist showed no threat. Just a single Conestoga, sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by a strong team. It slowed as it neared. A woman sat on the driving bench, reins held with practiced ease, mid-30s. Andrew guessed. Weathered face but strong, 2 children visible in the wagon behind her. She studied his broken axle with a professional eye. Heading west. Her voice carried the flat vowels of Kansas. Andrew stood, brushing dust from his trousers. The woman nodded, glancing at Emma and Thomas as they stirred awake. "That axle's finished. You got spare?" "No, ma'am. Nearest settlement's 2 days back. Storm's coming in 3. She said it matter of fact, like commenting on the weather. "I'm bound north, Dakota territory. Got room if you can spare westward dreams for a spell?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "Accept charity from a stranger. Change course entirely. 2 wagons travel safer than 1. The woman continued. "Even when one's pulling double weight. Name's Clara Morrison. Those are my children, Ruth and Daniel." Emma appeared at Andrew's elbow. Her face was pale, smudges of exhaustion under her eyes. Thomas stood behind her, swaying slightly. "North's the wrong direction." Andrew said, "North's a direction." Clara's eyes held his steadily. Wrong staying stranded with winter coming and 2 little ones depending on you. Ruth poked her head out of the wagon, maybe 10 years old, with her mother's direct gaze. Mama, are they coming with us? That's up to their papa. Andrew looked at his children. Really looked. Emma's dress hung loose. She'd lost weight on the trail. Thomas's eyes were hollow from poor sleep and worry beyond his years. The wooden horse dangled from his small fist. Pride was a luxury. His children's survival wasn't. How far north? Andrew asked. Valley past the Dakota Territory. Good land, I'm told. Clara gathered her reins. I'm pulling out at first light tomorrow. You're welcome to join or take your chances here. She clucked to her horses. The wagon rolled past, and Andrew saw it clearly well-packed supplies. Solid construction. A woman who knew what she was doing. Wait! The word came out rougher than intended. Clara stopped her team. We'd be obliged for the ride, Andrew said. I'll work. Hunting. Repairs. Whatever you need. Partners share the load equal. Clara extended her hand. Andrew stepped forward and shook it. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work. You got family in the north? She asked. Had family in Colorado. Clara nodded like she understood everything unsaid in that single word. Sometimes the trail changes. Better to bend than break. She drove her wagon in a wide circle, setting up camp 30 yards from his broken rig. Close enough for safety, far enough for propriety. Emma tugged Andrew's sleeve. Papa, we're really not going to Uncle Samuel's near... Not directly, no. But you promised Mama. The words hit like a fist to the gut. I promised your mama I'd keep you safe. That's what I'm doing. That night. Andrew lay awake listening to 2 campfires crackle in the darkness. His children slept fitfully, across the distance. He heard Clara moving around her camp, settling her own children for the night. Tomorrow they'd head north, wrong direction. Strange company. Every instinct said to refuse, to find another way. But his daughter's exhausted face had made the choice for him. Dawn broke cold and clear. Andrew worked quickly, transferring supplies from his wagon to Clara's. Bedrolls, cooking gear, the few precious items Sarah had loved. Each load felt like abandoning pieces of himself. Emma and Thomas watched in silence. Ruth and Daniel Morrison peered from their wagon. Curious but quiet. Clara checked the balance as Andrew secured the last bundle. That's everything? Everything that matters. The wagon. She nodded toward his broken rig. Leave it. Andrew didn't look back. Got no use for it now. Thomas suddenly ran to the broken wagon, scrambling up to grab something from inside. He returned clutching a small quilt, Sarah's stitching visible even from a distance. Can we bring Mama's blanket? Andrew's throat tightened. Course we can, son. Clara made space without comment, tucking the quilt safely between other supplies. Her efficiency spoke of someone who'd packed and repacked 100 times, who knew every inch of space mattered. Your children can ride inside with mine, she said. You can spell me on the driving bench when my arms tire. Appreciate it. Clara gathered the reins. One thing, I don't take orders and I don't give them. We decide together. That work for you? Yes, ma'am. Clara, just Clara. The wagon rolled north. Andrew walked alongside for the first hour, unable to sit still. His mind kept circling back to the promise he'd made Sarah on her deathbed. Take care of our babies. Give them a good life. He'd thought that meant Colorado, his brother's ranch. Family and purpose and solid ground, everything pointing west like a compass locked on true north. Now he was heading the wrong direction with a woman whose full name he barely knew. Behind them, the broken wagon grew smaller, a monument to failed plans, abandoned dreams. When it finally disappeared over the horizon, Emma started crying quietly. Andrew climbed up beside Clara on the bench. Mind if I sit? It's your wagon now, too. They rode in silence for a while. The prairie stretched endless in every direction, grass the color of old gold. Hawks circled overhead, riding thermals Andrew couldn't see. "What's in the Dakota Territory?" he asked finally. "A valley. Good water, protected from wind. My husband read about it in territorial reports." The past tense hung between them. "Fever took him last spring," Clara said, "before we could make the journey together." "I'm sorry." "Me too." She adjusted the reins slightly. "But sitting sorry doesn't plow fields or raise children. So I'm finishing what we started." Andrew understood that. The need to move forward, even when the person you'd planned to walk beside was gone. Sarah had been dead 2 years, and he was still trying to honor promises made in a sickbed. "What about you?" Clara asked. "What's in Colorado besides your brother?" "Was supposed to be a fresh start, partnership on his ranch. A place my kids could grow up with family around them. Will be again, once you get there. This is just a detour." Andrew didn't answer. He watched the northern horizon and wondered if she was right. If paths bent back to their original direction, or if some breaks changed everything. That night they made camp by a shallow creek. The children circled each other warily at first, but Thomas dropped his wooden horse, and Daniel picked it up. And somehow that simple exchange opened a door. By firelight, the 4 children sat together. Emma taught Ruth a song Sarah used to sing. Ruth showed Emma how to braid grass into rope. The boys tracked rabbit prints in the soft earth, Daniel pointing out details Thomas had missed. Clara handed Andrew a cup of coffee. "They'll be friends by week's end." "Probably." He sipped the bitter brew, watching his children smile for the first time in days. "Thank you for this. Thank me when we reach the valley." But Andrew heard what she didn't say. "Thank me when you figure out where you're really going." He stared north into darkness and had no answer. The first week on the trail established rhythms that felt older than they were. Andrew rose before dawn, built the fire, set coffee to boil. Clara emerged as the sun touched the horizon, moving through her own practiced routine. They worked around each other without speaking. 2 people who understood the value of silence. By the 3rd day, Andrew had the hunting pattern down. He'd ride ahead while Clara kept the wagon moving. Scout for game. Return with whatever the land offered. Rabbit, prairie chicken, once a young antelope that fed them for days. Clara handled the wagon like she'd been born to it. Never complained about the weight. Never faltered on rough ground. She knew how to read the sky for weather. Find the easiest path through broken terrain. Pace the horses to last all day. The children adapted faster than the adults. Ruth took Emma under her wing, teaching her trail songs Clara had learned from her own mother. Emma shared the lullabies Sarah used to sing, her small voice carrying across evening camps. Within days, all 4 children knew both repertoires. Daniel showed Thomas how to track animals, reading stories in bent grass and scattered earth. Thomas taught Daniel the hand signals Andrew had shown him for silent hunting. The boys became inseparable, trailing behind the wagon and inventing elaborate games. "Your daughter has a gift for music," Clara said one evening. "Gets it from her mother." Andrew poured coffee for them both. Sarah could make a cabin sing just by walking through it. Clara didn't offer platitudes or pity, just nodded like she understood. "My Jacob was like that with words. Could talk a stone into moving if he set his mind to it." It was the first time she'd spoken her husband's name aloud. They sat by the fire, watching 4 children play in the twilight. Ruth was teaching Emma a clapping game. The boys were building something elaborate from prairie grass and imagination. "They're good together." Andrew said, "Children usually are, given half a chance." Clara stared into the flames. "It's adults who complicate things." Speaking from experience, speaking from being human, she glanced at him. "You still planning on Colorado come spring?" The question caught him off guard. "That's where my family is." "Your brother's family. These children here. They're your family, too. Clara stood, brushing dust from her skirts. Just something to consider. She walked toward the wagon, leaving Andrew alone with his thoughts. He hadn't told her about the guilt he carried, how every northern mile felt like betraying Sarah's memory, abandoning the promise he'd made. His brother was expecting them, had a room ready, work lined up, a place in his family. But watching Emma laugh with Ruth, seeing Thomas's face light up at something Daniel said, Andrew felt something shift in his chest. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe he was complicating things that children understood instinctively. That night, Emma crawled into her bedroll beside him. "Papa, can we stay with Miss Clara forever?" "She's going to her valley, sweet girl. We're going to Colorado. But what if her valley is where we're supposed to be?" Andrew had no answer for that. He kissed her forehead and watched the stars wheel overhead. Northern constellations he'd never bothered learning because he'd always been heading west. By the second week, they'd fallen into such easy partnership that Andrew sometimes forgot they'd only known each other days. Clara would hand him tools before he asked. He'd anticipate when she needed to spell her driving and be ready on the bench. The children had stopped treating each other like strangers entirely. They were just children now, playing and bickering and making up elaborate stories about the prairie around them. One evening, Clara asked about Sarah's wildflowers. Andrew found himself talking about his wife's garden, how she'd coaxed blooms from the hardest soil, how she'd pressed flowers between book pages to save them through winter, how the cabin had smelled like growing things even in January. Clara listened without interrupting, her eyes on the fire. When he finished, she said quietly, "She sounds like she made beauty wherever she went." She did. That's a rare gift. Clara met his eyes across the flames. You honor her by remembering, but she'd want you to keep making beauty too. I think. Andrew swallowed hard. How do you know that? Because if I died, I'd want Jacob to live. Really live. Not just survive. Her voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. The dead don't need our loyalty that much. They need us to be happy. Later, lying in his bedroll, Andrew thought about those words, about Sarah's last coherent moments, when she'd gripped his hand and made him promise to take care of their babies. She'd never said anything about staying alone, never asked him to carry grief like a burden forever. Maybe Clara understood something he'd been too stubborn to see. The trail wound north through changing country. Behind them, the past grew distant. Ahead, the future remained uncertain. But here, now, in this traveling circle of 6, Andrew felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah died. He felt like he belonged. 2 weeks into the journey, the first snow began to fall. Light at first, just flakes drifting through firelight as they made evening camp. The children caught them on their tongues, laughing. But Clara studied the sky with worried eyes. "Big storm behind this," she said. "We'll need to push hard tomorrow." They did. The wagon rolled from first light until dusk barely allowed them to see the trail. Andrew walked ahead, scouting the path, while Clara drove with relentless focus. The children huddled in the wagon, unusually quiet. That night, around a fire that seemed too small against the gathering darkness, Clara finally told her full story. Jacob found reports about the valley in a Kansas City newspaper. She began. Her voice was soft but steady. Some surveyor had mapped the Dakota Territory, described this place with good water and protected land. Soil that could grow anything. Ruth leaned against her mother's shoulder. Daniel sat close on the other side. We spent 2 years planning, saved every penny. Jacob drew maps, made lists, dreamed out loud about the house we'd build. Clara's fingers worked at the hem of her dress. Then the fever came through our town last spring. Mama nursed him, Ruth said quietly, but it didn't help. Fevers don't care how much you love someone. Clara pulled her children closer. He died asking me to promise I'd still go. Said dreams don't die when people do. Snow fell harder now, muffling the world beyond their small circle of light. Emma moved to sit beside Clara. My mama died too. From fever. I know. Sweet girl. I can see it in how your papa looks at you both. Andrew felt the weight of 4 children's eyes on him. Sarah made me promise to give them a good life. That's what I've been trying to do. By running to Colorado, Clara's question held no judgment, just honest curiosity. By running somewhere, anywhere that wasn't the cabin where she died. The admission cost him something. He'd never said it out loud before, never acknowledged that he'd been fleeing as much as seeking. I understand that, Clara said. After Jacob died, I couldn't stay in our house. Everything reminded me. So I packed what I could carry and pointed the wagon north. Toward his dream. Toward something. She met Andrew's eyes across the fire. But here's what I've learned on this trail. You can honor the dead by carrying their dreams forward, but you can't live only for ghosts. At some point, the dream has to become yours too. Thomas crawled into Andrew's lap. Small and warm. Papa, is Mama a ghost? No, son. She's a memory. The best kind. She wants us to be happy, right? That's what you said. I did say that. Then why are we going to Uncle Samuel's instead of staying with Miss Clara and Ruth and Daniel out of the mouths of children? Andrew thought. The simple questions that cut through adult complications. Because Colorado is where we're supposed to go, he said. But the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Why, Emma asked, if being here makes us happy. Why go somewhere else? Clara stood, gathering her children. That's enough questions for tonight. Everyone to bed. But after the children were settled in the wagon, she returned to the fire. Sat beside Andrew in silence, both of them watching snow accumulate on the prairie. They're not wrong, Clara said finally. I know. The valley's big enough for more than one family. Andrew's heart kicked against his ribs. Clara, I'm not asking you to decide tonight. Just saying, there's room. If you wanted. She stood and walked to her wagon, leaving Andrew alone with snow and firelight and a future suddenly full of possibilities he hadn't let himself imagine. That night he dreamed of Sarah, not the fevered, dying woman, but Sarah as she'd been laughing, strong, alive. In the dream she smiled at him and said, "Let yourself be happy, you stubborn man." He woke to find Thomas curled against him on one side, Emma on the other. Through the wagon's opening, he could see Clara silhouetted against early dawn, already preparing for the day ahead. The children were right. This felt like family. The question was whether Andrew had the courage to choose it. The storm hit 3 days later with a fury that turned the world white. They'd made good progress, pushing north through increasingly rough country. Clara had been checking the sky constantly, reading weather signs Andrew was only beginning to recognize. When the wind shifted and the temperature dropped, she'd started looking for shelter. There, she pointed. That rise has a lee side. We can circle the wagon. The first blast of wind hit like a fist, nearly tearing the reins from her hands. Andrew grabbed the side rail as the wagon lurched sideways. Hold on. Clara fought the team, her arms straining. The horses panicked. One reared, throwing off the harness balance. The wagon tilted, left wheels lifting off the ground as they skidded toward a ravine Andrew hadn't even seen. He threw his weight to the high side, useless against tons of loaded wagon. They were going over. Then Clara did something with the reins, some trick of pressure and release, and the lead horse planted its feet. The wagon slammed back down, jarring Andrew's teeth. Get the children out. Clara's voice cut through the wind. Andrew scrambled to the back. Ruth already had Thomas and Daniel, was passing them down. Emma clutched Sarah's quilt, eyes wide with fear. Come on, sweet girl. They huddled on the lee side of the wagon as the storm intensified. Blizzard conditions, white everywhere. Wind so fierce Andrew couldn't see Clara, though she stood just feet away. We need shelter, she shouted. Together they rigged a makeshift tent using the wagon itself as one wall. Canvas stretched between wheels and stakes driven deep. It wasn't much, but it cut the worst of the wind. Inside, 6 people pressed close in near darkness. Andrew could feel his children trembling, could feel Clara's children too. All of them trying to share what little warmth they had. "Tell a story, Papa," Emma whispered. So Andrew did. He told stories through that first terrible day, making up adventures about brave rabbits and clever foxes while the storm screamed outside. When his voice gave out, Clara took over. Her stories about pioneer women and prairie wisdom. The children dozed fitfully, Ruth and Emma on one side. The boys piled together like puppies. The adults stayed awake, watching, listening, doing the mental calculations of supplies and time and survival odds. "Thank you," Clara said during a lull, "for catching the wagon earlier. We'd have gone over if you hadn't. You saved us by controlling the team. I just added weight. We saved each other." Her hand found his in the darkness, squeezed once. That's what partners do. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of being pressed together in semi-darkness, rationing food and water, telling stories and singing songs and pretending everything would be fine. 3 days of Andrew's arms around his children and Clara's, of bodies shared for warmth, of the artificial barriers between them dissolving like snow in sunshine. On the 3rd morning, the wind died. They emerged into a world transformed, everything white and silent. The wagon half buried, drifts piled higher than Andrew's head. But the storm had passed, leaving crystalline beauty in its wake. The children whooped and played, throwing snowballs, collapsing into drifts. Their laughter rang across the frozen prairie like bells. Clara stood beside Andrew, both of them assessing the situation. The wagon was intact. The horses had survived in their makeshift shelter. Supplies were depleted but sufficient. "We were lucky," she said. "We were together." The words came out before Andrew could stop them. That made the difference. Clara turned to look at him. Really look. Her eyes searching his face. "Andrew, I know." He did know. Knew what she was asking without asking. Knew what he was admitting without saying. Ruth called out, "Mama, look, Daniel built a snow fort." The moment passed, but the understanding remained. That night, making camp in the storm's aftermath, Andrew realized something fundamental had changed. Not just for him, but for all of them. They'd weathered the worst together and come through stronger. Turning back wasn't just impractical now, it was impossible. He'd chosen without choosing. The storm had decided for him. Emma sensed it too. She whispered as he tucked her in. "We're staying with them, aren't we? Papa, I don't know yet." Sweet girl. But he did know. Had known since Clara's hand found his in the darkness. Since her children and his had curled together for warmth. Since he'd looked at this merged family and thought mine instead of theirs. The valley lay somewhere ahead in all that white. Clara's destination. Jacob's dream. And maybe, Andrew was beginning to think, his future too. They pushed north through the storm's aftermath, traveling slower now. The trail had vanished under snow, forcing Clara to navigate by landmarks and instinct. Andrew walked ahead, testing the ground, looking for hidden dangers. Late winter had settled hard over the land. Food became scarce. Andrew hunted every day, ranging farther from the wagon, driven by the weight of 6 mouths depending on him. On the 8th day after the storm, he brought down a deer. It was a clean shot, merciful and quick. He field-dressed it quickly, working with numb fingers, then hauled it back to camp as the sun set. 200 pounds of meat, enough to see them through to the valley. Clara met him at the wagon, and when she saw the deer, she started crying. "Hey now." Andrew set down his burden, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She wiped her eyes fiercely. Everything's right. I couldn't have made it this far without you. Without all of you. You're stronger than you think. I'm strong enough to know when I need help. She gripped his arm. Thank you, Andrew, for everything. That night they feasted. Roasted venison. The first full meal in days. The children ate until they couldn't move, then collapsed in contented exhaustion. Andrew and Clara sat by the fire after everyone else slept. The stars blazed overhead, cold and brilliant. The valley was close now. Clara said, maybe 2 more weeks at most. What will you do? She asked. When we arrive, he'd been asking himself the same question for days. Help you get settled. It's the least I can do. And then I don't know. It was the truth. My brother's probably given up on me by now. Be spring before I could reach Colorado anyway. Clara poked at the fire with a stick. The valley's big. Room for more than one homestead. Clara, I know it's complicated. Jacob's dream. Your promises to Sarah. Everything we're both carrying. She looked at him then, firelight reflecting in her eyes. But the children are happy. Really happy. For the first time in I don't know how long. Don't that count for something? It counts for everything. Then why are you fighting it so hard? Because he was afraid. Afraid of dishonoring Sarah's memory. Afraid of presuming too much about Clara's feelings. Afraid of building something new that might break like everything else he'd tried to build. But he couldn't say any of that. Just shook his head. Clara stood. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. She went to the wagon, leaving Andrew alone with his doubts. 2 days later, Emma found him staring north at the horizon. Papa, you look sad. Just thinking, sweet girl, about Mama. Some. Emma took his hand. Her fingers were small and cold. Mama would want you to be happy. She told me that. Right before she died. Andrew knelt to look her in the eye. What exactly did she say? That you were going to be very sad. But I should remind you that being sad forever wasn't the same as loving her. That she wanted you to find joy again. Emma's eyes were serious beyond her years. I think Miss Clara makes you less sad. Emma. And I think Miss Clara is sad too. About her husband. But we make her less sad. Thomas and me. She squeezed his hand. Isn't that what families do, make the sad smaller, out of the mouths of children? Again and always. Cutting through to truth, adults danced around. You're right, Andrew said softly. So we can stay in the valley. I don't know yet. But he was lying. He did know. Had known since the storm, maybe since before. The valley was where they were heading. The only question was whether he'd have the courage to stay when they arrived. That night he made his decision. He'd help Clara reach the valley, honor Jacob's dream by seeing it fulfilled. Then he'd file a claim on neighboring land, close enough to help if needed, far enough to be proper. It wasn't everything his heart wanted. But hearts, he reminded himself, had led him wrong before. Better to choose prudence, better to be friend and neighbor than risk the pain of loss again. He watched Clara's silhouette at the wagon, memorizing the line of her shoulders, the way she moved. Spring was coming. So was goodbye to this particular closeness. He'd survive it. He'd survived worse. Or so he told himself in the darkness, trying to believe his own lies. Spring broke across the northern valley like a revelation. One day they were pushing through late snow. The next, the world had transformed. Snow melting into 1,000 silver streams. Meadows greening so fast Andrew could almost watch them grow. Birdsong returning after months of winter silence. And the valley itself, spreading before them like a promise kept. Clara pulled the wagon to a stop at the valley's edge. Just stopped and stared, tears streaming down her face. Jacob was right, she whispered. It's perfect. It was a sheltered bowl of land with a creek running through it, stands of timber for building. Meadows for grazing and crops, protected from the worst winds, facing south to catch every bit of sun. The kind of place you could build a life that lasted. Ruth and Emma held hands, both struck silent by the beauty. Thomas and Daniel were already plotting which tree would make the best fort. Andrew felt something crack open in his chest. This was what Clara had been carrying toward. Her late husband's vision, made real. They made camp that evening by the creek. The children ran wild, drunk on space and spring and possibility. Clara walked the land with slow reverence, touching trees and grass like greeting old friends. The next day she rode to the nearest land office, 20 miles south. Came back with papers making it official. Clara Morrison's claim, filed and registered. Andrew helped her mark the boundaries, helped her choose the best site for a cabin, helped her plan where the barn would go, where she'd plant crops, how she'd divert water from the creek. And with every stake driven, every decision made, he felt the moment approaching when he'd have to tell her he was filing separately. It came on the third day. Andrew rode to the land office himself, papers in hand for the adjacent parcel. A good piece of land. Maybe not as perfect as Clara's, but close enough. He could help her build, could see the children grow up together, even if in separate homes. He'd just finished filling out the claim when Clara found him. She rode up on one of the wagon horses, breathing hard like she'd been riding fast, dismounted in front of the land office and stood there, hands on hips. Andrew looked at the papers in his hand. Clara, why are you filing separately? Her voice shook. This is Jacob's dream. You said his valley. I heard you tell the surveyor that. It is. Was. Andrew. Was his dream. She took a step closer. It's my dream now. Mine. And my dream includes you and your children. If you'll have us. The words hit him like thunder. You want Chun, I want to build one life from two broken journeys. Her eyes were fierce. The children are already family. We're already partners. Why are we pretending otherwise? I have nothing to offer you. No land. No money saved. Just two kids and willing hands. That's everything. Clara's voice gentled. Don't you see we already have what matters? We survived the trail together. Survived the storm. Made a family before we even admitted that's what we were doing. Andrew looked at the claim papers. Separate parcels. Safe distance. The careful choice that protected against hurt. Or the coward's choice that avoided living at all. I'm afraid, he said finally, of dishonoring Sarah, of presuming too much, of losing again. I'm afraid too. Clara took his hand. Jacob's only been gone a year. Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying him just by being happy. But then I think, is this what he'd want me alone and grieving forever? Or me building something good from the ashes? Emma said almost the same thing. Then listen to your daughter. Clara squeezed his hand. The dead don't need our loyalty that much. Andrew, they need us to live. Really live. Andrew looked at her. Really looked. Saw the woman who'd offered shelter to a stranger, who'd driven through storms and hardship without complaint, who'd made his children smile again, who'd taken his broken family and merged it with hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah would have liked her, he thought, would have approved. And Jacob, wherever he was, probably understood that dreams evolved, that the valley he'd envisioned could hold more than he'd planned. Andrew tore the claim papers in half. Clara gasped. What are you filing jointly? Andrew smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Adjoining parcels. Partnership. If you'll have me and my chaos of children. Yes. Clara laughed, the sound pure joy. Yes, you stubborn man. They filed the new papers together, rode back to the valley side by side, and when they told the children, the explosion of celebration could probably be heard for miles. Thomas asked, Does this mean Ruth's really my sister now? Clara knelt and pulled him close. "If you'll have me as your mama." The boy wrapped his arms around her neck and held on tight. Andrew watched his daughter embrace Clara's children, watched 4 faces lit with identical happiness, watched Clara's eyes meet his across the space between them, full of promise and hope and the future they'd build together. The valley spread around them in all its spring glory, waiting for the life they'd pour into it. Jacob's dream, Clara's determination, Andrew's second chance. Home. Summer arrived, and with it, the sound of hammers. 2 cabins rose on adjoining claims, close enough that their porches nearly touched. Andrew and Clara had designed them that way deliberately, with plans to eventually connect them with a covered walkway. For now they stood separate but together, like the families building them. Neighbors came from other homesteads to help with the raising. Good people. Hard-working. The kind who understood that frontier survival meant community. They brought food and tools and strong backs, and by the end of a long week, both structures stood complete. Simple cabins, nothing fancy. But they had solid roofs and tight walls and windows facing south to catch the light. They had fireplaces made from creek stone and floors that didn't leak when it rained. They had room to grow. The children claimed all the space as theirs, running between both houses without distinction. Ruth and Emma shared a room in Clara's cabin. The boys bunked together in Andrew's. But in practice, everyone slept wherever exhaustion caught them. Days fell into rhythm. Andrew and Clara worked the land together, her knowledge and his strength combining into something greater than either alone. They planted crops, built fences, dug irrigation channels from the creek. Hard work, but good work. The kind that built calluses and satisfaction in equal measure. Evenings they'd gather on whichever porch caught the breeze. Watch the sun paint the valley gold and purple. Listen to the children play in the twilight, their voices ringing with a freedom that still amazed Andrew after months of watching them confined to a wagon. One evening, Clara asked, "Did you ever write to your brother?" "Sent a letter last month." Andrew stretched his legs, boots dusty from the fields. "Told him I found a different ranch. A better one." "What did you say about me?" "That I'd met a woman who could outwork, outthink, and outdrive any man I'd ever known." He smiled at her expression, and that I was hoping she'd marry me once a decent interval had passed. Clara's eyes widened. "Andrew Morrison, you did not write that." "Not yet, but I'm planning to." She laughed, the sound he'd come to treasure. "You're supposed to ask the woman first, you know." "I know." He took her hand, natural as breathing now. "Figured I'd let you get used to the idea of me permanent-like before making it official. I've been used to you permanent since somewhere around the blizzard." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children. Daniel was teaching Thomas to whistle. Ruth and Emma were braiding each other's hair, giggling over some private joke. 4 children who'd been strangers 6 months ago, now inseparable, now family. Inside Clara's cabin, on a mantel they'd built together, sat 3 objects. Thomas's carved wooden horse, a pressed wildflower from Sarah's collection that Andrew had carried across the prairie, and a small sketch of Jacob that Clara no longer kept hidden in a trunk. The past and present, coexisting peacefully. Andrew had worried about that. Worried that honoring Sarah meant he couldn't love again. Worried that Clara would see his continued affection for his late wife as a betrayal. But Clara understood. She spoke of Jacob sometimes, sharing memories with the same easy fondness Andrew felt when remembering Sarah's laugh. They'd both loved deeply before. That capacity for love was part of what drew them together now. The dead didn't require their silence. They required their happiness. Outside the barn, a repaired wagon wheel leaned against the wall. Andrew had salvaged it from his broken axle months ago, fixed it during long winter evenings. It served no purpose now except as reminder. What breaks can be mended. And sometimes the breaking leads you exactly where you need to be. "Think we'll make it?" Clara asked quietly. "Build something that lasts." "We already have." Andrew gestured at the children, the cabins, The planted fields. We've been building it every day since you offered a stranger space in your wagon. Best decision I ever made. Second best. Andrew pulled her close. Best was when you asked me to stay. The sun dipped below the western ridge, painting the sky in shades of fire. Somewhere in the valley, an owl called, the creek murmured its endless song, and 4 children played in the gathering dusk, their laughter the sound of healed hearts and found home. Next spring they'd marry, make it official in the eyes of law and community. But the important binding had already happened. It had happened in campfire stories and shared meals, in survival and hardship and choosing each other every day. The valley held them all, exactly as they were meant to be held. Spring turned to summer, turned to harvest. The crops came in heavy and sweet. Winter arrived gentle, and they weathered it together in comfort. 2 cabins full of warmth and life and the sound of family. And when spring came again, bringing renewal and promise, Andrew stood on his porch in the early morning and thought about the journey that had brought him here. A broken wagon, a stranger's kindness, a wrong direction that turned out to be exactly right. He'd been heading west when his axle shattered. Had thought that was the only path forward. But Clara had been heading north. And north, it turned out, was where he'd needed to go all along. The valley welcomed them home,